Have you ever wondered what would happen if you called Taylor up? I mean, what would happen if you turned all of Sunset Valley into werewolves? Well, you don't have to wonder much longer because today we are doing just that. So go get your drinks, get your snacks, and without further ado, let's get ready for this hairy ride. Naturally, to kickstart this challenge, it was time to create our werewolf queen, leader of the pack, the it girl. Before moving on though, we had to pick a name. And I thought, what better way to describe our inconspicuous, totally innocent main character who definitely doesn't have any secret plans to turn all of the regular hairless Sims into feral half-dog, half-humans. None at all. So anyway, to throw off the people of Sunset Valley off our scent, I decided a really good name for our protagonist would be Nay A Wolf. So anyway, I finished making Nay A. And you know what? Pookie was looking absolutely fire. And you know, I just had to give her pink cowboy boots because why not? Once she was created, it was time to choose her traits. And this is where I knew I had to get strategic. If you don't know, in The Sims 3, in order to turn Sims into werewolves, you have a higher chance of succeeding if the target, is a friend. So I wanted to go for traits that would hopefully mean that it would be easier to befriend other Sims to make my chances of successfully giving them the kiss of lycanthropy higher. In hindsight, I probably would have benefited from swapping irresistible to charismatic.
Can you say magnetic? Just keep going. Charismatic.
So I ended up choosing irresistible so that people find her hot. Listen, we're not above utilizing our womanly wiles for the purpose of this challenge. Do not get it twisted. I also went for schmoozer and friendly, of course, and party animal so I could throw big shindigs where I dubiously befriend the unsuspecting townspeople just to give them a surprise bite at the end of the night. Oh, and I gave her the dog person trait because it's funny. So anyway, I also of course gave her the leader of the pack lifetime wish as it relies on turning 5 Sims into werewolves, although I am planning on doing much more than that. Part 2 of making this challenge possible includes making a super professional Excel sheet. Listen, if you're gonna do a challenge like this, you better believe you need a good Excel sheet for tracking your progress. So I made this Excel and I included all playable characters in the list of Sims to turn and temporarily excluded and marked in red all the teens, children, toddlers, and babies in town because my morals allow me to turn innocent Sims, including single fathers and sweet little grandmas, into werewolves against their will, but I will not be making a single Sim into a werewolf against their will until they are of age, that is. I do have some of a moral compass, even if it doesn't seem like it. So anyway, I also excluded all service workers from this list, as well as burglars, the paparazzi, festival workers, etc. I repeat, I'm only turning Sims from pre-made, playable households. Part 3, let the fun begin. I moved our girlie into this sweet crib by the ocean. May I add, not built by yours truly, but rather EA? I know, I bestowed my gaze upon this modern mansion which was originally built for Moonlight Falls, and it absolutely blew me away with its beauty, so I had to give Naya the best of the best and move into this stunner of a build. Like seriously, who knew EA had it in them to build something so beautiful? Can I be normal about this build? Probably not. But let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video, which is the challenge itself. First thing our girl wanted to do was to get a job in business, which I respect.
She worked for what she got. She wasn't some little hoe mermaid.
When she got home, some randos from around town came knocking on her door, dying to meet her. So of course we went out and said hello. Little do they know, they will probably be our first targets. This f***ing dip Jared Frio started slapping the living bejesus out of us for no reason. We just met him 2 seconds ago. Count your days, Jared Frio, that's all I'm gonna say. The next day it was time to set our sights on meeting some of the Sunset Valley residents, so Naya traversed across town to the library where she ran into the wolves. I'd like to imagine they probably had a Spider-Man meme moment where they all realized their last name was Wolf. Anyway, naturally we started schmoozing the hell out of Morgana the second we got her attention, and we even cornered her in the library bathroom to keep befriending her like a totally normal person. She didn't like it. Unfortunately, it got late and we didn't have an opportunity to bite Morgana, so we headed home and went to bed. The next day I decided it was time for Naya to take a day to herself herself and her depraved plan, so she called up her boss and took an unpaid day off. She had a well-deserved lounge in the sun while waiting for the wolves, whose house is fully visible to her from her yard, to return home from work so she could put her plan into action. The second they were home, Nea got into her car, drove over there, waltzed into their modern mansion like it's her own, and pounced on Morgana. She also rolled the one to skinny dip with her. I think something lesbian is afoot. But also, turns out that Sims don't like it when you show up unannounced to their houses and turn them into werewolves and will automatically kick you out. Who would have thunk? After our first conquest, it was time for Nea to take a nap, but she did decide to invite her boss over so that she could schmooze her way to the top of her career and into turning her into a big hairy wolf, which she did successfully. Slay. The next morning, Nea woke up with a foolproof plan. Throw a party, invite a bunch of people, and get to work. And before we knew it, the party began. Nea wasted no time in identifying her next victim before she sank her canines into Nick Alto on her patio, while the land grabs were taking full advantage of her guest bedroom. Freaks! She also failed an attempt to turn Thornton Wolf, who beat her over the head with a newspaper. R.I.P. Pretty soon the party ended because everyone just left, probably because there was a hairy maniac on the loose trying to bite people, but the party still turned out to be a modest success. A win is a win. The next day rolled around and I realized that Nancy Landgrab still hadn't left my lot after the party. I mean, the modern mansion on the beachfront is prime real estate, but sorry Nancy, this land isn't free to be grabbed. So I decided to turn her into a werewolf instead. That'll teach her. This put Nea into a good mood and prompted her to put leisure day into good use, so I decided to throw a pool party despite it raining cats and dogs, and invite a bunch of my new besties over for a howling good time. And a good time was had. I don't know if you remember how a couple of days ago Jared Frio smacked the hell out of Nea completely unprompted? Well, consider the hatchet buried. While woohooing, Nea worked up an appetite, and therefore as soon as her and Jared jumped out of the bed, she jumped him. Anyway, it was a new dawn and a new rainy day, and while Nea was working her ass off getting yet another promotion, I was taking count of our progress so far. The rowing parties, as a way to lure unsuspecting citizens of Sunset Valley into their lycanthropy era, wasn't proving to be that successful of a plan, so I had to come up with another strategy. I decided to next try picking one sim at a time that I had a decent relationship with and invite them over for some quality one-on-one time. My first victim, Iqbal Alvi. With one easy fight and curse bite, Iqbal had been initiated into the world of werewolves. Fast forward to the next day, and it was finally the weekend, which meant Nea had a full 48 hours to dedicate to her plan of depravity. Her first plan of action, turn Thornton Wolf into a wolf. However, Thornton was the first sim thus far who didn't seem to mind at all that we forced him into the lycanthropy life, and instead, well, see for yourself. I guess he's just into the whole thing. We kicked out Thornton straight after getting more than we bargained for and headed out on the town to pay a visit to our dear friend Hank Goddard, who we ruthlessly attacked on his front porch and then got kicked off of. But did this stop our girl? No! In fact, Nea was invited over to the Altos for a lovely little get-together, and as soon as she got there, she did what any normal person would do. Cornered their only child in her childhood bedroom and turned her into a werewolf. And yes, I did make sure she had aged up to a young adult before attacking her. What do you take me for? I then got a little overly confident and tried to bite Cornelia Goth, who was not having it. Humiliated, Nea ran into her car and zoomed home. The next day, I realized that I was wasting time and playing this challenge way too slowly. I had to meet people, befriend people, and turn them at a much faster pace if I wanted this challenge to amount to anything. So I headed to Central Park to meet as many Sims as possible and to hopefully turn a few. I cornered some new potential friends into a friendly conversation when I spotted everyone's favorite innocent grandma, Yumi Sekimoto, hanging out with her grandson. I of course made a beeline over to her in order to see if I could straight up attack her since she's elderly, and guess what? It worked! Sorry Yumi. After Yumi, I spotted Bessie Clavel across the park, and I just had to test my theory again that elderly Sims are easier to turn into werewolves without having an established friendship. And then, to my utter enjoyment, I realized that I had hit the elderly sim jackpot here in this park today because I saw Bessie's husband Buster in the park too. So of course I ran over to him and attacked him unprovoked. Come on, who do you think I am? Anyway, Buster was easy to beat as well. Before wrapping up for the day, I tried to flirt with the certified most hottest single dad of Sunset Valley, Leighton Sekimoto, but that had the audacity to retch at Nea? Absolutely ruthless. Your days are numbered, Leighton. The next day, I had the utter joy of catching Thornton Wolf's metamorphosis on camera right outside the business building. The plan has been set in motion and there's no coming back from this baby. For a bit of a break, I decided to let Nea stop and smell the roses. She had developed a little crush on Leighton, so she decided she wanted to write him a love letter. And that she did. What a lovely little intermission, isn't it? The next day, Nea pulled herself up by the bootstraps and she got to work. The next couple of days can only be summed up as hustle, hustle, and more hustle. Not only did Nea get promoted at her job, she also became my elite employee. With her won't take no for an answer attitude, there was no stone, sim, left unturned in this town. For every failed attempt, Nea had a few tricks up her sleeve to charm her next victim and get them to lower their defenses just enough for her to successfully pounce. It's very inspiring, actually. We were just under 2 sim weeks into the challenge, and I started to see werewolfified Sunset Valley townies pop up randomly. But it wasn't enough. It pains me to admit this, but it was only at 2 sim weeks into the challenge that I realized I had the ultimate stalker's dream mod in my game, Enra's Tagger. This mod allows me to see every sim in town and be all up in their business without meeting them first. So I promptly enabled the mod and began devising a new master plan. I decided to get smart and attack all the elders first, just so that they don't all die before I have the chance to turn them. If they were to die before this, I'd consider them unturned, and therefore the challenge would be a failure. I did also catch Nick and Holly Alto share some quality were-father and were-daughter time together, fighting each other in the gym lobby. How sweet! The next couple of days after enabling the mod meant serious business. And I don't just mean because Nea received yet another promotion! I once again traveled around Sunset Valley, inviting myself over to Sims' houses and attacked them as soon as I charmed them enough and got them to lower their defenses. But this tactic does not come without its own set of challenges. Nea traveled to the Wainwrights, but failed an attempt to turn Susan into a werewolf. However, this didn't seem to dampen the mood at all, and Susan and Boyd got down to it right in front of Nea. I'm not sure if this is some weird thing they're into, or a punishment for trying to turn them, but anyway. After my turning spree, I was invited to the Altos again to another party. This was brilliant since 1, I hadn't bit Vita yet, and 2, this would presumably present another opportunity for me to attack some more Sims. So I hopped in my car and drove over to find yet another opportunity to corner an innocent Sim, who just so happened to also be elderly, in a bathroom. After finding Vita outside making out with Gunther Goth, she also showed up in the bathroom where she stood in a puddle of what I really hope was water, and we attacked her. Naturally. Why does this always happen in bathrooms? Anyway, it was then that I realized that while I had done a pretty good amount of progress on the challenge, I did need to turn to Enra's tagger to check who was still kicking, living life as their regular old selves. In that moment, I realized I had overlooked the hearts whose daughter Bibi I had turned, but not the parents. This had to be remedied ASAP, so I zoomed over to Cassidy Hart. Once I got there, the game started wolf blocking me by giving me routing issues and whatever this abomination is. But after a few more moments of simulation lag, things finally got back on track and I was able to attack Dory and Gus Hart in their kitchen just as God intended. In case you don't remember, my boss Ileana Langerak was one of my very first victims, but I realized I hadn't bit the rest of her family yet. I also realized that the Langeraks lived just up the road from the Harts and decided to remedy this injustice at once. I waltzed into their house and decided to give her husband a bite. No, not that kind, you perv. Anyway, it was then time to turn my sights to the upstairs where the rest of the family were in deep, deep slumber. I quickly checked my stalker mod to make sure the kids were indeed grown, which they were, thank God, and woke them up. I managed to turn everyone in the house except for Parker, and embarrassingly, our girlie Naya had a bladder failure on her boss's porch. Girl. The next day, Naya was too embarrassed to visit the Langeraks after marking her territory on their property, so she invited Parker over to her house. The plan had been set in motion, and I have a one-track mind, okay? If I don't turn this guy into a werewolf now, then I'll just forget about him. To my surprise, though, they really hit it off and started flirting out in the snow, and well, you can probably guess how this story ends. In a werewolf's bite, of course. What did you think? The next couple of days, I was just unstoppable, stalking Sims and attacking them at every opportunity. After yet another turning spree, I headed over to the Landgrab and woke up Jeffrey Landgrab just for Nancy to swoop in like she owns the place or something and block me from my attempt. I did not want this to turn like my visit at the Wainwrights, so I ran into Malcolm's room to wake him up and attack him while his parents were doing the do next door. After that was done, the coast was clear with Nancy asleep, and I made my way to their bedroom and attacked her husband. Sweet dreams! To avoid another accidental territory marking, Naya decided to pee before leaving the Landgrab mansion, which was a good call since she was literally about to piss herself again. The next morning, I realized I still hadn't managed to turn Susan Wainwright, who at this point was getting really, really old. So I made my way over to their house to correct this mistake. And what do I find? Like, really? The Wainwrights have the key to everlasting love and lust, since every time Naya goes over there, they're just going at it. But my question is, why do they always do it in front of her? Weirdos. So, as soon as they were done, Naya decided it was finally time to turn Susan into a werewolf once and for all, and at this point, mostly as a punishment for forcing her to see all of that twice now. It's just too much, Susan. I also came to the realization that while I had turned both the Clavel elders into werewolves, I was yet to sink my canines into their very attractive criminal son, Xander. So Naya ventured out, walked straight into their kitchen, and just as I was about to bite Xander, he decided to fall asleep while his pot of macaroni and cheese was burning on the stove. This made me very nervous as one, I was fully intending on having Naya woohoo with this guy, and two, if he died before I bit him, it would technically mean I lost the challenge. So I prayed to the artificial intelligence gods, and to my excitement, they listened. Xander promptly woke up and moved the crispy mac and cheese off the stove, ultimately making way for Naya to bite him, in more ways than one. After turning the majority of an entire town into werewolves, Naya was feeling stinky and tired. It had been a long long in-game year for her, and this manifested as her falling asleep on the sidewalk on a random afternoon. So I decided that as a reward for her hard work, she should go on a real date with Xander to get an opportunity to relax after running around town so much. So she called Xander up, and the two enjoyed a beautiful evening in their werewolf forms. So romantic. I don't know about you guys, but I ship them. But I guess Naya wasn't the only sim in town that was proficient in stalking. Unfortunately, as her and Xander were leaving the bistro after grabbing a late night snack, I was notified by every player's worst nightmare of a sound effect of what was happening back on my home lot. Naya was being burgled, and of course did not have a burglar alarm at this time. So the burglar was just free to roam her beautiful beachfront mansion and steal all of her stuff she had kinda worked hard for. I immediately put my thinking cap on though. Did this mean the burglar had been staking out my house waiting for the moment I left to steal all my stuff? Or since Xander's a criminal, is this one of his buddies who he told to come rob Naya while the two were out on their date? Either way, it's very suspicious. The police who arrived at the scene seconds after the thief had fled the scene told me they had fled the scene. No shit, Sherlock. Feeling shaken and afraid by the terrifying ordeal, Naya turned to look for her new beau who had escaped to frolic in the ocean in the midst of all of this. Disappointed, Naya just headed to bed. The next day, I decided to channel all of her frustration into attacking some more townspeople. Who needs therapy when you can just create a monster pack of wolves out of a population of innocent Sims, right? She started with Tori Kimura, then moved on to her next victim, Mortimer Goth, who fainted at the sight of a werewolf just to wake up to two more werewolves fighting at his feet. Talk about exposure therapy. She then headed to the single mom's household to turn Molly and Sandy French into wolves. She turned Molly, and that's when this happened. The Sims 3 terrifies me sometimes. Then, something incredible happened again, when I caught Fiona McIrish and Molly French woohooing. Seems like the single mom's household ain't so single anymore, and Sunset Valley just gained a pair of absolute power couple lesbians. But no, seriously, I kind of feel like I need to do a playthrough with them falling in love now. Anyway, the next day rolled around, and I started off by doing what I do best. Stalking Sims, walking into their homes, and cornering them in their bathrooms in order to turn them into werewolves. My first victim was Monica Morris. I then moved on to attacking Aisha Ansari, Darlene Bunch, and Mirage Alvi. With these Sims crossed off the list, my Excel was looking like this. Mostly red for having turned pretty much everyone in town apart from the unborn Keaton baby, the unborn Urson baby, I don't know how you pronounce that name, I'm so sorry, and Sam Sekimoto. The end was near and my master plan was almost fully realized. I could practically smell victory. The only problem was that the Keaton child and Urson child were both still teenagers with a couple of more days to go until aging up to young adults. So after turning sweet, poor Sam Sekimoto into a wolf, Naya decided to take up some random hobbies to pass the time. These hobbies included nuzzling and sniffling up Morgana Wolf, going to a house party at the Andrews house which had a very rabid vibe, getting robbed again, and windsurfing. Oh, and getting abducted by aliens, of course. Just the usual stuff. Then, finally, the day arrived when both of the unborn babies of Sunset Valley finally grew up, and it was time for the last time for Naya to polish them canines and spread the cursed bite to the last two unturned stragglers in town. Just like that, they were cursed with lycanthropy, and all of Sunset Valley had been turned into werewolves. But neither I or Naya, the notorious party animal, could say farewell to this challenge without throwing one last big party to celebrate fulfilling her destiny successfully. So, she rented out Central Park and sent off the invites to her favorite fellow werewolves and waited. Needless to say, the party was a howling good time, literally. I found out that if a bunch of werewolves are in one place at the same time and one of them howls, they all start howling. I found this really funny for some reason, so I had Naya just endlessly howl through the whole entire party. Anyway, with all the Sims of Sunset Valley turned into werewolves, that brings us to the end of the video and to the end of this challenge. I wish I could end the video with some insightful remarks, but all I really found out is that the people of Sunset Valley are very easily manipulated and way too trusting. At no point did they spread the word about Naya actually being a werewolf, and instead she was left to roam the streets freely, stalking her prey and attacking at the most random moments. Although, that kinda worked out for us in the end, didn't it? I really loved making this video and I hope you enjoyed watching it. If you did, please leave it a like and let me know what you would like to see from me in the future. I hope you're all having a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the world, and I will see you soon. Bye!